welcome back to Next Generation.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at the 27th edition of Nintendo Power, which features Mega Man and Dr. Wily's Revenge for the Game Boy on the cover.
We'll also be taking a look at Ninja Gaiden 3 and Dragon Warrior 3. Let's jump right in. Our first game up this episode is Ninja Gaiden 3, released in 1991 by Tecmo. This is the third in the series on the NES. We've taken a look at Ninja Gaiden 1. We didn't take a look at number 2 yet. They all seem to have a fairly similar gameplay style, continuing the story of Ryu, the main character, this time fighting in a genetic laboratory. What did you think about this one, Laurel?
I enjoyed it a lot. It is really similar to the first one, so pretty much it kind of just felt like the first one, I guess. The one thing that changed was the story, and it was interesting because when I was first watching the beginning cutscene, it was talking about how, you were supposedly, or you killed Irene, who in the first game helped you out. So I was kind of confused as to what happened there. But then it comes out that, apparently someone was impersonating you. So then you get to go and figure stuff out about that. But at first, he starts out in this lab because that's what Irene was looking at before she died.
So it seems fairly obvious with the story that there's some sort of, cloning thing going on. Maybe a clone of you they're using for assassinations or something. So you're kind of investigating this laboratory. I thought even with just the few levels that we had gotten to in our quick playthrough, there was a pretty good variety. That second level with the sand was interesting.
Right, it had the mountains, and then it looked like there was some kind of structures in the back, I guess. I don't know what I don't think that they have any significance or anything, but it definitely was interesting.
Yeah, it's some nice parallax scrolling on that level. The animated sand is kind of interesting. It reminds me of a little bit of Super Mario 3 had some levels.
Yeah.
It's actually a common thing now that I think about it, that games that use that kind of sinking sand. Also, that second level had the kind of cool thing where you would get halfway through the level and there was a cave, and you went into the cave and then you were in the underground section, so that was kind of a cool thing to have it change within the level.
Yeah.
The first level was kind of an interesting setting with the kind of test tube creatures growing in tube kind of things.
Dad was watching me play and he was like, "Are those alien babies?" And I was I hadn't actually noticed it that much because I was focused on trying not to die. But it was pretty funny, I guess.
Yeah, so they did some pretty cool animated background elements and things that I think really give it a good atmosphere. Overall, it seems like a pretty solid entry in the series, and if you're a fan of the first or second, you'll probably like this one too.
Yeah.
We decided to throw in our first Game Boy game that we're taking a look at, which is Mega Man in Dr. Wily's Revenge. The first time we've dug into the Game Boy. What made this unique, Laurel?
Okay, so this one, instead of the iconic 8 different kind of style of bosses, there is only 4, which makes sense because the Game Boy probably didn't have as much memory. I'd assume that's why they did that, instead of the usual 8. And I think a 9 for, the final boss. And I think that they are Cutman, Iceman, Fireman, and Elecman.
I think a common thing we're going to see as we start looking at some Game Boy games is that they often are kind of a pared down version of their NES counterpart.
Yeah.
But I felt like this was a pretty good port of that Mega Man gameplay.
Right.
You definitely had the same kind of feel and controls that you were used to from the NES.
Yeah.
One thing that I definitely noticed was the change in contrast due to the lack of color.
Yeah, that really caused a few problems for me, I guess.
Things like, where a platform would be floating that you could on the NES tell pretty easily because it was a different color. They really have to work harder with the 4 shades of gray to make it stand out.
Yeah.
And be as noticeable. I noticed they tend to use a lot more like patterns for backgrounds and things to kind of differentiate, whereas they would use more colors and things to highlight an item.
Yeah.
On the NES.
And it was kind of hard. Like, it did cause some problems because I'd be looking for the next platform to jump to and I'd be like, I'm not quite sure where to go. But then Dad usually had a pretty good eye for that and would be able to be like, oh yeah, I think that's a platform.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job with bringing that Mega Man experience to the Game Boy. The music was that kind of classic, iconic Mega Man style. I didn't have a Game Boy growing up, but I think I would have been pretty pleased with this as being able to play that Mega Man experience on the go. And then our final game for this episode is Dragon Warrior III from Enix in 1991. Enix would later go on to be merged with Square to form Square Enix, which made a lot of the more modern RPGs that we see today. So this is a continuation of the Dragon Warrior series. So the story of this one is somewhat independent of the other 2 games. It is actually a prequel and takes place in a different world. At some point you find out that you actually do travel to the world of the other 2 games. So it has very similar gameplay. I felt like the graphics of the characters were a little more detailed for the battles. One thing that was kind of cool is when you're selecting your party, you can select from some pre-made characters, or you could also go and create your own to select from. How did you find that experience, Laurel?
I thought it was really interesting because I feel like in most games where you have your own little party, you kind of just have to choose from like either some auto-generated or preset characters that have very specific stats and stuff. So it was interesting that you were able to make your own, and I feel like you could have named some after your friends or something, and you could have had some little like pretending and being like, oh my gosh, yeah. My friends and I are saving the world or something like that, because kids do that kind of stuff.
One thing that was kind of interesting is when your characters would die, they would actually follow you around as a ghost sprite. But that was kind of an interesting way to remind you that you had characters who had died in a battle or whatever, and you need to go back to the town to revive them. We traveled to a couple different towns, but didn't get too far into the game. These games tend to be a little more time intensive to really explore them. But overall, it felt like a pretty solid continuation of the series. And I think the multiple people in your party adds more, because the first Dragon Warrior just had your individual character.
It really adds something to the game when you add more people.
Especially when you have the different classes, because you get to kind of build your strategy based on what type of characters you choose.
Yeah, and especially in RPG, like it's an anomaly when you find an RPG without a party or multiple players. And
that actually reminded me, one thing we forgot to look up that we thought was kind of funny was that the one of the classes was the Pilgrim.
Right.
And we never did find out what makes a Pilgrim special.
Right. And
there was the Goof Off.
I think that's what they were called.
That was funny as well.
Yeah. Since I was that was when I made my custom character and I named her Frog. It was really weird. They ask you what gender you are at the beginning of the thing, but then all the dialogue refers to you as male, even if you said that you were a female.
It didn't seem very consistent where that applied.
Right. Like, I feel like the only thing was the action menu. Like, when you press search, it would say that you didn't find anything at her feet. or if you looked at your stats, it would say that you were female. But that was really interesting to see how inconsistent it was.
You would think they would have gone through, and it could have been something with the translation.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I was reading this one was translated later, years after they had created it. Thanks for joining us on another Next Generation episode. We hope you enjoyed our first coverage of a Game Boy game. Also, there'll be some Super Nintendo games starting to show up in Nintendo Power, so we look forward to those.
Thanks for watching this episode of Next Generation. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.
And we'll see you next time.